Hey everybody, it's me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi out here in Northern California. And today we're going to do a really fun class. This is called Friada Fabulous. And I'm really excited to teach this one to you. This is a tangle idea that I've had for a long time in my mind and have been wanting to teach and just didn't have the time or was a little intimidated by creating her. And I have finally just put my foot down and said, let's go for it. So things that we are going to need for class today are you're going to need to have a Micron PN pen, or you could use an O1 if you don't have a PN. You're going to need to have your Signo Uniball pen, but you could also use a white jelly roll if you don't have the Signo. And then, of course, I have a mechanical pencil, so have just any kind of graphite pencil nearby so that you can do some of the string work that we're going to do. And then finally, you're going to need to have the template, which was sent to you when you took the class. So this is the template that we have right here. And of course, you're going to need to have colored pencils. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, so let's get ourselves centered before we begin to tangle. For those of you who aren't familiar, I like to do a little bit of meditation just to get myself centered and ready to create. And so let's go ahead and take a comfortable seated position, however that works for you, inside your body today. Let your feet touch down onto the floor. Allow your spine to grow comfortably tall. Resting back into your chair just a little bit. And if you feel comfortable, allow your eyes to close for a moment. You can allow your hands to rest in your lap. And just take a moment to land in your space as you soften through your facial features, relaxing through the shoulders and the arms, all the way down through the hands and the fingertips. Relaxing through the chest, the belly and the rib cage, the hips and the thighs, the knees and the calves, the ankles and the feet. Allowing your entire body to be at ease in this moment. Dropping into your breath and just being aware of the breath as it rolls in and as it rolls out. Feeling the expansiveness of the breath on the inhale. Feeling the release of the breath on the exhale. Inhaling and expanding. Exhaling and releasing. Inhaling and expanding. Exhaling and releasing. Just for a moment here, I want you to notice on the inhale if there's a pause at the end of the inhale. And as you exhale, notice if there's a pause at the end of your exhale. Just being aware of the pause at the end of the inhale. And being aware of the pause on the end of the exhale. And maybe letting yourself linger in that pause just for a little bit as you breathe in, feeling the pause for a couple of seconds, and then exhaling, feeling the pause at the inhale before the inhale for a couple of seconds. Inhaling one more time, feel the pause. And exhaling and letting your breath return back to its natural pace. And taking a moment to scan through the body here and noticing any places where you might be still holding tension. And sending your breath to those places that need it the most. Softening in your shoulders, softening in your belly and in your hips. Maybe you've furrowed your brow or clenched in your jaw. See if you can let those things go. And taking one more deep breath right here. Let it go with a sigh. And then in your own timing, wiggling in the fingertips and wiggling in the toes. And gently bringing vision back into your practice by blinking the eyes open. And let's get ready to make some beautiful Zentangles together. Okay, so we are going to get ourselves started here. And I just want to say one thing before I take these tiles off the page. You know, Friada has been such a huge inspiration to so many people. And I know for myself, she's been a huge inspiration in the way of determination. So, you know, she had to endure so many hardships in her life. And even when she was down, she was not out. Her creativity still flourished. She still prospered in her own way. And I just am so grateful for a wonderful role model like her. So even though we find ourselves in very difficult times right now, we can look to Friada for inspiration and determination and perseverance. So with that said, let's get in touch with our Friada fabulousness and make some great, beautiful Zentangles. So I'm going to take these off to the side here, and I'm going to grab for my template. And I'm going to zoom in on the template here, and you can see that the template is very, very faint, and there's a reason for that, and that is that it's just a guide. So I'm going to work with my mechanical pencil here for a moment, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just dividing this circle that's in the middle and creating a nice center line. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and do a small circle right in the center. Then I'm going to do an aura around that circle. You can see I'm taking my time. And then I'm going to do it one more time. Now with that said, we're going to let that one go just for a moment. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a guideline for her hair. So you're going to see me come in right at the side of this circle, and I'm going to create a slightly wavy line that's going to come in right before the end of her face, so right before the bottom of the tile here. I'm going to do the same thing right over here. So I'm just going to come down, create that wavy line, and then I'm going to connect right before the bottom of the end of the tile here. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us a realistic interpretation of what hair might do. Okay, now this one's feeling a little bit wide to me, and that's the wonderful thing about having a pencil handy. So I think I might make this a little bit narrower just because I feel as though it is a little bit wide. So I'm just going to come in and very lightly erase that. Now we can let go of our pencils and we are going to start creating. Dun, dun, dun. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my Micron pen, and we'll go ahead and work with just the flower first. We'll get to Friada in a minute. So I'm coming into the top here, and I'm just going to go in and overdraw right over the top of Friada there. And then I'll go ahead and do it again. And then I'm going to do it one more time. Now I know some people can be intimidated by drawing circles. I don't even try to make my circles perfect anymore. I think I prefer them to be a little bit messy and odd. So I'm going to start by creating a little bit of a petal here, and you can see that I'm just going to make 2 dots on either side of that division line, and I'm going to come up, make my petal, and then I'm going to drop down again. Now you can turn your tile to make this easy for your hands here, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go 1 and 2 and come out. I'm touching the edge of that circle and I'm dropping right back in again. I'm going to keep on turning the tile here. 1 and 2, coming up and out and dropping back in, and I'll go to the other side and do it again. So once I have those in, now I can come in and add the rest of my petals here. So I'm just going to start just in that starting point where I had these before, and I'll go ahead and create the next set of petals, keeping it really, really easy for myself here. And you'll note that they're not exactly perfect, and no petals really are on a flower, so allow your flower to be exactly how it is. Coming in, and then dropping back down again. And you can see that there are these really nice spaces around the flower, just like so. So I'm going to build that flower out just a little bit. I'm going to come into the top of each one of these flowers, and I'm just going to make a little dot there, and then I'm just going to arc it out and bring it right back in again. So I'm turning, making a dot, and arcing it back out. Turning, making my dot, and arcing out. And I'll continue all the way around the flower, just like so. And finally coming to the last one right here, and coming right back in. And look at how nice that looks. Really fun, very playful, very mandala-like, which I love. So if you need to pause me, this is a great place to do it. Otherwise, we are going to continue on. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come up right in here and add some detailing. And I'm going to do it all the way from the center to the top. So you can see that I am going to intersect. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go all the way up, and then I'm going to make a little dot right on the edge. So I just used that division line to guide myself up. Then I'll go ahead from that main point, I'll stop, make a little shorter one, and I'll do another one right here and stop and make a shorter one. So we're going to do that in every single petal that we have here, except for the outer ones. So it's just 1, 2, and 3, all the way around. Continuing. Coming around. So you get the idea here. Go ahead and finish up these over here, and I'll see you in a minute. So that came out really nicely. We're going to start to work on the side pieces over here. So I'm going to let go of my micron pen just for a moment, and I'm going to go ahead and start to divide those spaces once again. So you can see that I'm right here, and I'm going to go ahead and divide the space in half. And then I'll go ahead and I'll divide it again, the best that I can. I'll divide one more time, going down the side here, nice diagonal. And I'll do one more right through here. So you can see that I'm having to pull a little bit of a holly bomb motion with this. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So I'm just going through and dividing the space. Going through and one more time. Once you have that, now we can take our pens and grab our pens and use those as guidelines. So let's make this a little bit bigger so that you can see what I'm up to. So this is a really fun tangle, and I'm not sure that I know the name of it, but I really enjoyed it. So I'm going to come right into the center here, and I'm going to use this line as a guide. You're going to see me come up and make a very narrow flux that comes all the way outside of our circle. Can you see that there's my circle line and it went all the way out? I'm going to do the same thing over here. Same thing over here. Over here. Now I'm going to have to hollybaw right there. You can see that I did. And one more right here. So once you have that, you can go inside of this and once again add that line and put the droplet in it. So I'm just going through and adding that in just like so. Now if you want, you can come right into the center and add a focal point to the piece here, and that will give it some definition. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in between these petals here, and I'm going to do a little bit of shattuck. Now if you need to pause me to catch up, this is a great place to do it. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep on going. So I'm going to do some shattuck here, just a little bit of an arc with 3, and then I'm going to go up and do it again. And then I'm going to stop once I get to the edge of my circle. So you can see that I'm just leaving that edge of the circle there. I'm going to turn the piece and do it again. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an arch. And then I'll go again. And then I'll do it one more time. And I'm just turning as I go. And you can make them as different as you want them to be. It's just a really fun way of doing a flower. Making sure that I'm on the page here, sorry about that. And coming around. And one more time. Now you can see that I have this little corner pocket right in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and do a little piece in here and a little piece in here. So really, really fun little flower in there. We're going to do the same exact thing on the other side. So go ahead, finish up what you're working on over here and do the exact same thing over here. So now we're going to start to work on the pieces on the side here. Let's go ahead and grab our pencil again, and we're going to divide the space. So I'm just going to go ahead and divide the space here and here. And then I'm going to do my diagonals. Now you can see that I'm going to have to hollybaw a little bit to get underneath. And hollybaw just means that I'm just lifting up my pencil when I get underneath that particular flower. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm just going to go 1 and 2 and then divide and then divide. Now I'm going to grab my pen, my micron pen, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a little bit of flux. So I'll start by making a little bit of a dot right in the center, and I'm going to go ahead and come all the way up, and notice how I broke outside of the circle and I'm dropping back down again. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Then I'll come over to the side and do it. And you can see I'm going to turn my tile just a little bit. Dropping back in, coming over here, dropping back in. I'm going to dip over here, coming back in. I've got one more spot right in here, coming back in. Now you'll notice that there's two lines in here that I did not get to do. So I'm just going to pretend that I'm going underneath the flower and working the rest of that petal. So just like so, getting right into it. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So I'm just going to come in right over here, make my dot. And once again, the teardrop shape going up and out. One more here. I'm going to turn the piece sideways and do my diagonal. Turning it again. Turning it again. Here's another diagonal right here. Now you can see there's the two lines, so I'm just going to pretend and get right in there so that now we've got the beginning of those two flowers on the outside. Go ahead and finish those up on your page, and then we'll come back and we'll do the rest of the flower. So now I want you to think of the tangle Shattuck, which is a really fun tangle to do. For those of you who are not familiar with Shattuck, Shattuck tangle looks a little something like this, where you have an arc and then you build off of that arc, just like so. It's not my best, but we'll go ahead and just let it keep on building here. So you could come over here and build off of it. And then you could come over here and build off of it. So you can see the idea of Shattuck as it builds. It's one of those really fun tangles that gets nice and clustery. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little Shattuck inside of our Friada flowers here. So I'm going to come into this one first, and I'm just going to go arc, arc, arc. Then I'm going to find another place to arc off of. I'm going to go to this corner and I'm going to go arc, arc, arc. Coming in over here. And you'll notice that I'm not leaving the edge of the circle on these. So I'm going to do that again. I'm just going to keep on turning my piece. Just going arc, arc, arc. Coming off the side. Making sure that I'm staying on camera. And then one more time. I'm going to turn the piece and do it again. And it really gives kind of this neat look that really makes those little petals pop. And I love Shattuck because it's one of those tangles where you can just let yourself go and have a good time with it. It's not rocket science, it's just fun. Now you can see as I turn my piece around that I need to finish up over here. So I'm just going to go in. And it really gives it a neat feel. So go ahead, do the same thing on the other side, and we'll meet up and do the next part. Okay, so you can see I've had a chance to do both sides here. We're going to add a little bit more detailing into these pieces. I'm just going to come into our petal here, and I'm going to mimic what we did in here. So I'm just going to go all the way up towards the top and make a dot. Just like so. All the way around in these pieces. I really do like my pieces to have a little bit of relationship to each other, even though they are contrasting with each other. I still want them to feel like they are in the same piece. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, so you go ahead and do that too. Okay, so now let's begin to work on the hair that we have for Friada. So I'm going to just go ahead and overdraw in those lines here. You can see that I'm just letting them guide their way down. And you can see there's the wave in her hair. Now, the tangle that I'm going to use for inside of her hair reminds me an awful lot of In a Pod. And I'm just going to flip this over right here and talk about In a Pod for a second. In a Pod is a really nice leaf-like shape that generally has tipple inside of it. And then there's auras that go around In a Pod that look a little something like this. Now, what we're going to do today will not have the tipple in it. So I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to blow this up right so we can see what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by making one In a Pod. Now this is really kind of an intuitive tangle. So I'm just going to come in and let it land in this space. Now, I'm also going to start my auras in here. So you can see that I'm going to aura her face, and then I'm going to make another aura, and then I'll make another aura right about there. So that's a first In a Pod. Then I'm going to look for another space to create an In a Pod, and this looks like a really great place to grow out of. So I'm just going to come up right over here, and I'm just going to aura this wavy line that comes right in. Once I have that, I'll just keep working up from there. So here's another spot where I can create an In a Pod or an aura. And you can see I'm making them fairly large. I don't want her hair to be too busy. And then I'm going to come in over here, make another one. And you can see that they're all a little bit different in their presentation. I'm just going to go in right over here and right in here. So there's one side of her head. Let's try to do the other. So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to create another little pod right in here. And then I'll go ahead and I will aura. Once I have that, I'm going to come up over here. And remember, these are kind of wonky. They're meant to be wonky. It's hair. Hair is not perfect. I know my hair is never perfect. I have curly hair, so it's always kind of wild and crazy. And remember, Frieda's hair was never perfect either. She was a wild woman. So let her hair be slightly wild. And then I'll just come up over in here and add a few auras. Just like that. So there you can see now Frieda has her hair, which is really, really cool. Now you'll notice that I've got these little kind of interstices where my flowers are going to end. And I'm just going to add some lines in there for Frieda's hair. Now, not to worry about her face looking too square at this point, because once we start doing shading, you won't even notice that her face is more square. So with that, go ahead and finish up her hair, and we'll get into her facial structure. Okay, so let's work on Frieda's facial structure here for a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down. I'm going to say this is almost a good 2 inches, and I'm going to make a dot. Maybe it's 1.5 inches. So you can see that I've made my dot in the center, and then I'm going to go ahead and make a dot right here. You can see that's about 1/4 inch away from the edge, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now you'll notice that I'm using my pencil here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a gentle arc and connect. And then I'm going to make another gentle arc and connect. Now, because Frieda has that really fun unibrow, I'm going to turn her on her side here. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend out just a little bit past that dot. And now I'm going to create an aura for her unibrow. And you can see that I landed at the very, very tip of the piece, so that when we come back in, all I'm doing is just making two little crescent moons and then doing an aura. So I'll just start from the center and work my way out. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. Then once I have that, I'll turn her on her side, come a little bit deeper off of this edge, and I'm going to aura that edge. Once I have that, I'm going to puddle in her eyebrows. So you can see that I'm using my little Micron pen here. I've got the Pigma pen in my hand because my Micron PN kind of, it died. So here we go. We're working with our Pigma pen, which is the same thing as the Micron PN. It's just an earlier incarnation of it. And I'm just softening out that little tip there. The great thing about working with black is that when you work with black, you're definitely getting a nice deep shade, a nice rich shade, and it divides the space really, really well. So go ahead, get in there and puddle that in, and then we will start to work on her eyes. Okay, so to create Frida's eyes, you can see I've got my mechanical pencil back in my hand here. We're just going to come into this area where the unibrow is, and we're going to come down, I'm going to say about an inch, and make a dot. Now once we have that, we know where we're working, and we're going to go ahead and make a little dot on each side that's about 1/4 of an inch from that dot. And because this is pencil, it'll be really easy for us to erase it a little bit later if you want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in right here, and I'm going to give this a little hook and then drop down and come all the way out to the edge. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to drop down, come out, and go all the way to the edge. So there's her eyes. So you can see that there's a nice spacing between the eyes here. And I'll go ahead and I'll erase that dot so that it's not confusing for you. And then once I have that, I'm going to grab my pencil, or rather my Pigma pen, and I'm going to ink in her eyes. So I'll come in right where that dot is, and I'll just drop down and come out. And then I'll do the same thing over here, dropping down and come out. So there's her eyes, and we have a nice space that we're going to be able to shade in a little bit later. Now we used a really nice pattern that really reminds me of, I think it's called Zipper, Zippity Doodah, Zippity. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's Zippy. Anyway, we're going to come in and we're going to make one line longer and one line shorter. So it'll go a little something like this. So we're going to come out and make a long line and then a short line. And then a long line and then a short line. Long line, a short line, and that's how her eyelashes are going to come in. We'll do the same thing on the other side. And you can see that I'm leaving a little bit of space here. So I'm going to do it again. So I'll go one, long line, short line, long line, short line, long line, short line. So there are her eyelashes, which are really nice and dramatic and really, really fun. Take a minute to finish those up, and we'll move on to the finishing of her headdress. Okay, so for this next part, we're going to be using a tangle. I was hanging out on Strictly, I think it's called Square One Purely Zen Tangle. And that's Chris Titus's site. I love her on Facebook. And somebody had just written in this new tangle called EO Fur. And so it's a really fun tangle, and I thought it would go really well with Friada. So I'm just going to come in up at the top of Friada where her little flower is, and I'm going to make an arc coming out, and then I'm just going to come right back in again, almost like we did with this little guy right in here, but a little bit more narrow. Now I'm going to make a petal that comes off of the top of the ophir here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little petal and then have it touch back down again. I'll make another petal that starts right in here. You can see that I'm not back here, but up here. We'll go ahead and make another petal and have it connect. We'll do one more. Have it connect. And then let's put one more on this side. So really easy peasy for ophir, eophir, however they want to pronounce it. These names, they are so silly. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a little detail by just making a gentle arced line coming down the center of the piece in here. And I'll do the same thing over here. Once I have that, I'm going to add a couple of fescue. So I'm going to go one fescue. And here comes another fescue. Really fun. So we're going to do another eophir on this side just to give this piece a little bit of balance. So I'm going to come over to the area where I have on the flower, and I'm going to arc out. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop right back in again. So remember, it's a little bit narrower than this one. Then I'm going to go ahead and make the petal that comes off the side. Coming right back in again. Now watch, I'm coming in on the side of the leaf here, coming right back in, going over here, adding a little petal over here, and then I'll add one more right off the side. Let's add a couple of fescue to it. So here's one fescue, here comes another fescue, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide the space. So once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and start to add a little bit more interest into the piece by adding some poke root. Poke root is one of my favorite tangles to do. I really enjoy it. Poke root looks a little something like this. So that's 1, 2, and then I'm going ahead and making a frowny face at the top, and then I'm going ahead and adding a little bit of a circle so that it looks like a little root. I'm going to turn it over, and we're going to add one poke root at the top. So I'll come in right here and just give it a little bit of a bend. There's my stem. Make my little frowny face, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in that little poke root right there. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. So I'm just going to come off and arc in, make the stem, make a little frowny face, and then go ahead and create that poke root. I think that tangle is really addictive. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here and do the same thing, 1 and 2, make the smiley face or the frowny face, and come right in over here. So if you need to pause me to catch up, this is a great place to do it. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on rolling. Now, if you've never taken class with me before, one of my favorite tangles in Zentangle is tipple. There's just something about it that really, really does it for me. And it just makes a piece look very effervescent. So I'll just pull in my original Friada here. Tipple is generally just a circle. And sometimes they're clustered together, but other times they can be effervescent. And you can see that my tipple are very effervescent in this piece here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some tipple in here so that she has a very effervescent quality to her. So I'm going to come in here, and I like to vary up the size of the tipple that I'm doing. So I'm going to start with a fairly large tipple. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a medium-sized tipple. And then I'm going to do a fairly small tipple that's getting away. I'm going to go ahead again and make a large tipple. Then I'll make a medium tipple and another small one that's getting away. Then as I come up in here, I'm going to be a little bit more random with my placement. So I might add some smaller ones in here just to keep things interesting. Now as we get closer to the top, you can see that I've got a little bit more space, so I can come in and add one or two. I might add one just right down in here just for fun. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. So I'll come in over here, add a fairly large tipple. There's a medium tipple that's getting away, and then a smaller tipple. Now what we want to think about with these is that we're going to be shading them, so you don't want to make your pieces too small either. I'm just coming in and adding random tipple as I go, and you'll notice that I'm leaving space in between them because I am going to do some work around them as well. And I might just add one little tipple right in there. That feels pretty good to me. Maybe there'll be one or two in here. That feels pretty good. I think we're ready to go ahead and have some fun. Who wants to do color? I do. Let's get started. All right, so we are going to get ourselves started here. We're going to start directly with this flower right here. And I'm feeling like I want to do a morning glory-ish kind of flower. So I'm actually going to work with the light aqua. This is PC992, and I'm also going to have a little bit darker of a color nearby, and this color, you can tell that I really enjoy this color, and I can no longer tell you the name of the color, but the number is PC903, and I absolutely love these two together, so we're going to work with those together. So I'm going to start by going in and adding some of that blue into the flower in here. And you can see that I'm working with just those front pieces of the flower. So I'm just going to come around and start to work through the piece. And I'm going to only do the front ones with the light blue. So I'm going to do this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Go ahead and do all of those with just a really light tension, and we'll come back and we'll do some shading. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so you can see that I've had a chance to do all that blue. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a little bit of heavier pressure on that pencil, and you can see that I'm going to start to get a little bit more depth going on here. So I'm just getting right in there and adding a little bit more depth over that color. Now, you know, you might be looking at this going, oh, it's going right over the pen lines, that kind of thing. You can go back in and clean up those pen lines a little bit later. We're just going to add those colors in now, and then you can clean them up when we're finished as a finishing touch. Because it's much harder to get the microns to go down after than it is before. So that's why I've started with it before. Now I'm going to come in and get that blue going all the way through here. And then once I've had a chance to get that blue in there, I'm going to grab for that darker blue and really start to work with it. So I've got this darker blue in my hand here, and I'm going to come halfway up that medium tension that I just did. Now with this darker blue, I don't have to push that hard because it already has enough pigment for me to work with it. So you can see I'm going to slightly turn my page as I work with that flower. I'm getting right in there. Just letting that really start to come into fruition. And I love that it's starting to bring your attention into the center of the piece, really bringing you right into that gorgeous little flower. And it really does have kind of a mandala-like feel to it, which I really enjoy. So getting right in there. And then we're going to come back and we're going to blend these out just a little bit. So you can see that I've got my white pencil in hand, and I'm just going to lightly start to blend out the edges a little bit to give it a little bit of a pop of softness. Almost like a watercolor. Really, really pretty. So go ahead and do your flower. And remember, you don't have to use the same colors as me. You can try any color you want. All right, I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so now we're going to start to move into morning glory territory. So we're going to get a little bit more of that purpley feel going on in here. So I'm going to come in, and I've got the Dahlia purple in my hand. This is PC1009. And I'm going to start with the Dahlia purple in those in-between places. Just really getting in there and adding that cool soft purple into this. And I'm using that light tension that we talked about in class. Remember that light, medium, and dark? So I'm really just using that lightest tension because this particular pencil has a lot of pigment in it. And so we don't want to push too hard straight off the bat because then we won't have any variation in the petal. So I'm just getting in there and adding a little bit of that very, very light Dahlia purple. Coming all the way around. And then once I've had a chance to get all the way around with that Dahlia purple, I'm going to grab for that violet color. Let's see if I can find that violet color. It looks like I have it right here. I want to make sure that it's all sharpened up and ready to rock and roll. You always want to make sure that your pencils are nice and sharp when you're working with them. And I'm going to come in here now and start to develop that depth right in towards the center. So I'm going to come up really light first, and then I'm going to push a little bit harder, and this is where it's going to start to get morning glory-ish, yeah? So really, really light with that pencil at first, coming about halfway up, and then nice and deep in towards the center. So I'm going to go all the way around and use this technique. You go ahead and do yours, and we'll meet back up and we'll start to talk about these flowers on the outside. All right, so I'm going to start to work on these pieces out here. Now I know that we have not finished on the inside, but we're going to bring some of this onto the inside in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start to work with these main petals that are kind of dominating that flower in there. I'm just coming in and just handling those main petals. And I love the way that the Spanish orange pops off of the violet and the Dahlia purple. There's just something that really speaks to me about that. So I do love to see a good contrast whenever I'm working with a piece like this. I'm just getting in there and getting those nice petals settled in. Once I have that, I'm going to start to grab for this really nice, it's called Goldenrod, and this is 1034, and the first one that I used was PC1003, and that's Spanish orange, one of my favorite pencils. And you know, I had to replace this pencil because it had gotten so small. A lot of my pencils end up looking like this and even smaller, so it was time to replace. So I've got this really fun one. This is called Goldenrod, and I just love this one with the Spanish orange. So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to use it about 3/4 of the way up, getting right in there. Making that nice and rich and earthy. And then once I've had a chance to get some of that earthiness in there, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of red into the center of the piece. And the red that I'm using today, this is called Scarlet Lake. And I'm just going to put a blush of that red right in the center. I'm sure that you have seen sunflowers with a little blush of bright crimson, either right on the edges or on the inside. And so I'm just kind of channeling that kind of feel. So I'm going around and getting in there. And you can see how energetic that makes that. So go ahead and take that very same thing and bring it over here. So whatever colors you're using, just bring it over and let it hop right into that flower. And don't worry about it if you're not using the same colors as me. I really want to encourage you to go off the rails and try your own thing. All right, let's meet back here after you finish that flower. All right, so we're going to start to work with the background of this flower. Remember those really cool shaddocks that we put back there? In my hand I have magenta 930, and I have to say that, you know, growing up I never really looked at magenta like this. This has a little bit more red to it. It's a cool red. So I don't really know if I would really call that a magenta, but that's what they're calling it. And you can see that I love this pencil. This is a really great color to use. So I have these warm colors in here, and this is a much cooler red, so I'm going to get a really nice contrast off of it. And I'm just going to start very, very lightly by popping in some of that really pretty cool red in here. And you can see that I'm just letting that come right in there. And I'm going to let it get right into the background too. And get right in there. I'm just filling up the space with that really pretty kind of cool red. It almost has like a wine kind of feel to it. I could say that it's more like a burgundy than anything. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing on this side. Get right in there. Now once I've had a chance to get that nice cool color in there, I am going to reach for a warmer red just to give this a little bit of pop. And so I think what I'm going to reach for is a Scarlet Lake, which is right here, I believe. Yep, Scarlet Lake. And Scarlet Lake is PC923. And I'm just going to start to dip into the center here and bring some of that Scarlet Lake right into there and just let it kind of seep its way out from the center. So you can see that that gives me a really nice pop of color, and they're kind of playing off of each other, which I really love. It just gives it that zing. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now once I've had a chance to go all the way around, I'm going to come back in with that white pencil again and give it a little bit of a blending feel. And when I do that, you're going to see that that cooler red comes off more like a pink. So you can see that it gets kind of like a pinkish hue to it. And so I'm blending the edges between that really, really warm red and that really, really cool red. And that really gives that a nice soft feel. So go ahead, finish up your flowers, and then we'll catch up and start to work on that central point right in here. Okay, so I'm going to get right into that center point, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with that bright orange right in the center. So I'm just going to get right in there with that really pretty Spanish orange that I have, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to skip this one and I'm going to bring it again to that outer edge in here. So I'm going to go in and give it a little bit more. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach for that scarlet red. Say that 10 times fast. and start to bring that in there. Now, I will start to give this a little bit of shading on each side just to give it a little bit of depth. Yeah. And then I'm going to reach for that really pretty golden rod that we used over here and give this a little depth on the side as well. So I'm giving both of those pieces a little bit of depth. And I love that it gives the relationship between those and these together. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start to work on her hair, and you'll start to see that little pieces of this will come into the hair as well. Okay? All right, finish that up and we'll go on to the next part. All right, so for this next part, I'm going to start to use a really nice warm brown inside of her hair, and I've got this really beautiful color. This is terracotta, and this is PC944. I love this color. It's a really great color. And then I also have a little bit of the goldenrod again, so I'm pulling a little bit from the flowers into her hair. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by working with the terracotta first. And for shading on this particular tangle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and very lightly start to go to both points of that little pod that we created in here. So you can see that I'm just lightly working with that in here. And then I'll start to give it a little bit of depth at the top and at the bottom. Now once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring in that golden rod right in the center of that point, and it's acting like a highlight. So I have a confession to make. Before I was a Zentangle teacher, I was a hairstylist for many years, and so whenever I see hair on a piece, I want to give it dimension. And hair is never a flat one color unless somebody puts like a shoe polish color on their heads. So I always want to give hair a little bit of dimension. So we're going to do each pod just like that. So we're going to come in very softly, start to bring in that color, and then leave in a little bit of a highlight to give dimension. So you can see I'm going to start with that sienna or that terracotta color and just really get that in there, and then deepen it up towards the edges to give it dimension. And remember, if you don't have the same colors as me, just pick colors that you think might look really nice in her hair. I'm just getting right in there, giving that a little bit of dimension. And then once I've got that, I'll go ahead and I'll add a little bit of that goldenrod in there just to give it that highlight. And you can decide how little or how much of that highlight you want to add. She's a little bit blonde to me here, so I'm going to go ahead and diminish a little bit of that highlight on her. So you kind of see that I'm working over the top of it and giving it a little bit of interest. And you can see how pretty that is. So I'm going to go over and do the other side, and it almost feels a little bit too red to me as well. So I may go ahead and grab for a really pretty umber color just to tone it down a little bit. So I've got, what color is this? This is called light umber, and I may go in and add just a little bit more ash into that color. So you know, it's fun to play and kind of feel out what's going to work for you. You know, I've changed her hair color a couple of times in all the tiles that I've done. So, you know, I haven't, you know, figured out which one I like the most. But I do like the way that it gives it dimension and interest. So go ahead and do the other side and we'll meet back up. Okay, so I'm going to come in and start to softly blend out her hair a little bit. And you can see I've got my white pencil in my hand. And I'm going to go ahead and just really softly start to give that a blurring, as it were. Now I'm being very mindful to leave in those highlights, but you can see that I'm just very softly working my way into the highlight to give that softness that we're looking for. Same thing up in here. And let's give that a little bit more color because it seems to have lost some of its intensity. So you can see that when I start to take that white pencil in there, it kind of softens everything and gives it a little bit of a blend out. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, just getting in there and adding that in to soften up that color. And you can see that that really gets that to have a lot of dimension, which I love. So now we're going to start to work inside of her face. If you need to pause me here for a moment to finish up what you're working on, go ahead and do so. Now I realized that I put the cart before the horse just a little bit. We forgot to put in a little bit of the brown for her hair up at the top. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab some of those colors that I used. I have that really nice light umber, and I'm going to just start to sprinkle that in throughout underneath the flowers just to give a little bit of dimension and also some gravity for her face. So you can see that I'm just going to get in there and put that in, and then I'm going to lighten it just a little bit with a little bit of the white just to blend it out. So now we're going to start with some shading. Okay, so I have a really beautiful color in my hand here. This is called burnt ochre, and this is really going to be nice to do her face shading in here. So this is PC 943, and you're going to see that I'm just going to go over her face very, very lightly with this really pretty color. So Friada had a really nice olive tone to her skin, so I'm just going to go in and start to create that really nice olive tone throughout the piece here. And you can see that I'm working on the side of my pencil as I bring in these large swaths of color. So I'm just going to come in and lay down that color, and you can see that my pencil is moving in that circular motion, and you can see I'm nowhere near the top because I'm doing so much color in here that I don't want to have my hand near the top, because when you have your hand near the top of the pencil, that means you're doing detail work, and I'm nowhere near that right now. I'm just coming in and giving her her beautiful tonality. Now, once you have that down, we're going to start to emphasize the shading on the side of her face and her head. So what it's going to look like is I'm going to start by doing gentle circular-like motions, and you can see that I'm pushing a little bit harder on my pencil. And I'm going to guide that down around her eyebrows. You can see that I'm going to go underneath her eyebrows. And I'm going to come around. Now you can see that I'm leaving light right in here. Now I'm going to come underneath her eyelids, give her a little bit of depth, and then I'm going to continue to just lightly shade my way down. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side here. So I'm just coming in and shading. And you can see just by shading on both sides of her face, we're already starting to get a really nice feeling for her facial features. Coming underneath her eyelids. You can see I'm leaving it light right there. And then I'm going to come down the side of her face and let it just kind of flow down. I'm going to come back up to the top here and go around her hairline. And then I'm going to start to press a little bit harder as we get closer to the edge in here. So just developing a little bit more intensity around the edge of her face. Now once I've done that, you can see already how much definition has happened just from doing that small bit. I really love that. So I'm just going to give it a little bit more right around her eyebrows. Not too much, and you can see I'm going very lightly. And then I'm going to get underneath her eyebrows just a little bit. And then once I have that, I'm going to retire that pencil just for a moment. I'm going to go back over to that really nice light umber, and I'm going to start to give a little bit of that light umber onto the edges. So you can see how that's building a nice definition here. And I'm coming around the edge, just like so. I'll do a little bit more underneath her eyebrow, just really close. And then I'll add a little bit of that really nice ochre, or rather the goldenrod that we had up here in this flower. So we want to start to bring some of that feeling of the flower into her face. So you can see that I'm just giving a little bit of softness into it, and a little bit of softness into this. See how I'm leaving the light in towards the center for a little bit of shine? I'm going to add a little bit of that goldenrod over her eyes, just to give her a little bit of dimension in her tonality. I really love the way that that's starting to look. Now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to add a little bit of that white into the piece, and this is what's going to blend those colors together. It's going to start to give it a softness. Do the same thing down in here. Coming around in her eyes. And really just letting that all start to blend in. Really pretty. So you can see that she is missing her nose, so we need to start to develop her nose. And so what that's going to look like is I'm going to come back in with that really nice burnt ochre, and I'm going to start to develop that shading that's going right over her, right underneath her eyebrow. And you can see that I'm just going to let that dance down in between her eyes, and then I'm going to let it pause. So you can see that I'm just letting it dance down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down the sides of where her eyelids are and give a little bit of texture. And I'm going to do a little bit of texture over here. And then I'll grab some of that ochre, it's the burnt umber, sorry about that. Some of the burnt umber, and I'll add a little bit in here and a little bit in here. So that develops her nose, and then you can see that I'm going to start to blend in And I'm going to start to blend in over here. And it's really giving her face that nice softness in here. All right, so go ahead and start to work on that, and we'll come back in and finish up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to just blend this in a little bit more on the sides with some of that white, just to soften it up so it's not so hard. You can see I'm coming up in here as well and just kind of blending off those edges there. And that's really starting to look quite nice. So I think her face is now finished. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to work in the background and up into here. So let's start with the flowers that are up at the top here. I'm going to take some of that purple that we were using in here, and I'm going to start to bring it into this flower. So what that's going to look like is I'm going to use the division of the flowers to have one side be the purple and another side be a really pretty graphite color. So I'll just come in, and I've chosen the left side for the purple here. And I'm just going through and getting that purple in there. And I'm going to do the same thing to the opposite side. So I'll just go in and do the same. And then once I have that, I'm going to treat this the same way. I'm going to do a little bit of the darker purple here and a little bit of the darker purple down in here. You can see that I'm just really getting that in there quite nicely and just getting that nice definition all the way through. So you're going to do that on all of your flowers too. So go ahead and do that over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and just lightly blend the edges again, just to give it some softness. And that's really quite lovely. So go ahead and use that technique over here, and then we'll start in with a little bit of graphite. So some of you have heard me say that I'm not a big fan of graphite pencils because I'm left-handed and I end up wearing it on my hand. So I have my trusty PC9065. This is the cool gray from Prisma, and I love this color because it doesn't smear or smudge, and it mimics graphite in a lovely way. So I'm going to use the same technique that I did over here with the graphite. So I'm just coming in and bringing in that gray, and then I'll do a little dusting of darkness at the top and a little dusting of darkness at the bottom. So you can go ahead and do the same thing all the way around your piece on both sides. You can see that the juxtaposition between the two, the graphite and the purple, is really quite lovely. It's one of my favorite color combinations is graphite with purple. So go ahead and do the same thing over there, and then we'll regroup and start to work with our poke root. Okay, so this is really coming along. I'm loving it. It's so fun. So I'm going to take some of that blue that we started with here, and I'm going to start to bring it into the tipple that is around our Friada here. So I'll start with this one right here, and let's blow this up nice and large. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start with that beautiful light aqua that we started with here, and I'm just going to leave a little light source on the left hand side. And then I'll come in and I'll do a little bit of that blue that we worked with, that darker blue, which is the 903. And I'm just going to do a medium tension first, and I'm only coming about halfway through that light aqua with it. So I'm just giving it a really nice soft feel. Then I'm going to come in and give it a little bit of a heavier push with my pencil, and you can see that that's going to give it a really nice orbness very, very soft kind of feel to it. So I'm going to go through all of my tipples and I'm going to put that color combination in there. So go ahead and do yours. And I have to say, tipple is one of my most favorite tangles to do filling in color with because it is so meditative and so relaxing. And so I really want you to get into the groove and just enjoy being present with this particular tangle. All right, enjoy. Okay, so I am really loving where this is going, and I love all these little blue tipple. They're wonderful. Now I'm feeling particularly fiery today, and I've been trying to do different backgrounds with my Friedas. The first one I did had this really beautiful green, and then the second one I did was like this beautiful electric blue. And now I have in my hand a really beautiful earthy kind of orange. This is a cadmium orange. This is PC 118, and I'm just gonna really enjoy using this because it's just gonna make this whole thing pop off and have a great time. You can use any color that you want in the background. You don't have to use the same color as me. And I'm also going to be using a little bit of that Scarlet Lake again to get a little bit of a powerful effect in the piece. So you can see that I've sharpened up the pencil really, really sharp, and I have a really long lead here. This is because I'm going to be doing a large swath of color all around Friada. So you can see that I'm way back on that pencil and I'm laying that pencil down on its side. And you can see that I'm just going to start to put that color all around those tipple that I have around Friada. So you can see that I'm just getting right in there and laying that color down all around her. And I just love how beautiful that's going to be. And as soon as we start to really get some definition there, it's going to really pop. So you can see that I'm going to go in and get that really nice orange going. Let's make that a little bit closer so you can really see it. And once I get up and around in here, I'm going to let some of that orange go around the top of her head and into this whole area. I love this color. It is so pretty, so earthy, and just luscious. So I'm going to come in, and once I've gotten through this one part, I'm going to just do a little bit more of the demo for you. Instead of having you watch me do the whole thing, I'll just do this one side. So I'm going to come in now, and I'm going to start to push a little bit harder on that orange, and you can see that when I press a little bit harder on that orange, it really starts to show itself. You know, when you start with it really, really light, it doesn't really show up much, but then you can see that it's starting to get really nice and bold behind her. So I'm just working my way around her head, and you can see that I'm being a little bit more random with the way that I'm moving that color around. I'm not being perfectionistic with it at all. I want it to kind of have a messier feel. Coming up into here and all the way around into here. So you're going to see me just kind of roll around those really beautiful flowers at the top. And I'll even go up and around in here as well. Now you're probably saying to yourself, God, that's looking awfully messy. What is she doing that for? But just wait. Now I'm going to grab for that really beautiful Scarlet Lake, right? That's what I'm using. And I'm going to just start to dance that around on the edge of her face. So you can see I'm staying pretty close to the line. I'm getting right in here. Coming all the way around. So you can see that I'm really going for that kind of electric feel around her face and around her head. I really want to get that kind of passionate Friada. Now watch. So you remember that yellow that we used up in here, that beautiful Spanish orange? So I've got my Spanish orange here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sharpen it up a little bit. So you know how we were using the white to do some blending off? We're going to use the orange to do some blending off. So watch what happens when I come in here just on the edges and start adding in some of that Spanish orange right around the edge. So I'm going to come in here and start to bring in some of that Spanish orange. And let's go ahead and bring that outwards a little bit so you can really see what I'm up to. So I'm blending off the edges and I'm leaving a little bit of white or the lightest color out towards the edge. And it's super fiery and really fun. You know, she was a passionate woman. She definitely lived her life on her terms, and so I wanna give her color, her beauty, and her fieriness all in this one piece. Now, if I want to come in with some of that white, I can come in and start to blend off the edges of the piece. So you get the idea, right? Where I'm going with this, just by having that really beautiful kind of fieriness around the edge here. So I'm going to go all the way around with that same color scheme and do the same thing all the way around, and you'll go ahead and do the same. All right, have fun, play, don't be afraid, really let your inner kid come out and have fun. Super fun. I'm really, really enjoying how beautiful this is turning out. She is glowing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of wallpaper to this. Now, sometimes I do a full-blown wallpaper on these, and I'll show you what I mean. So you can see that there's some printemps in the background, and it goes all the way through the piece. But for this particular one, I think I'm just going to do little bursts of wallpaper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find little places where I can create the wallpaper. Now, wallpaper means that I'm just tangling with the same color that I was coloring with. And this is our darkest color. This is the Scarlet Lake that I'm working with. And I've got it nice and sharp. And I'm going to do a little bit of printemps in here. So you can see that I'm just starting to bring in some printemps. And I like to vary up my wallpaper so that all the wallpaper is not the same. So you can see I'm going to do some of these really large, and then I'm going to do some smaller ones right next to it. And you can see that I'm trying to keep that printemps as tight as I can. You want that wallpaper to look nice and clean and fun. Now I'm going to do a nice small one right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip. I'm going to find another spot to put it in. So I did 3 here, and I'll come up in here. Nice big one first. Then I'll do a smaller one over here. And then I'm going to do a little itty bitty one right in here. And you can see that my lead just broke a little bit. That's okay. So I'm just doing little bursts of wallpaper on this one. And sometimes, you know, it's not how much you put something in, but maybe the pause, the quietness that you leave behind. There's a really great quote from Miles Davis that I just found out about. He says, sometimes it's not about the note, sometimes it's about the pause. And I really do agree. When you're adding lots and lots of stuff to a piece like this, you want to make sure that it's actually going to work for the piece. And because we have such a fiery little thing going on here, maybe it's not necessary to do too much. Coming down in here. Maybe one up here. You can see that I'm just kind of working my way around. So go ahead and just do little bursts of this, and we'll come back and do some highlights, and we are going to be finished. All right. right, so we're going to start with some highlighting in here. And you can see that I have my tipple down over here that I'm going to start to work with. So I'm going to start to add a little bit to that. And you can see that that pen is a little cranky pants, but that's all right. I'm just going to get it started. And once it's started, I'm going to work very, very lightly with it and add a little couple of dots there. And just a little line and a couple of dots. And you can see that that starts to make those little tipple really nice and juicy and fun to work with. So I'm just getting in here and working with it. And you can see that I'm even near the poke root, and I can pop into the poke root and do the same thing with the poke root and just give that a couple of splashes in there. So I'm just going to go around and do the tipple right in here. You can see I'm just playing, and I'm really being mindful of where I put my hands so that I don't smudge, because this stuff can smudge, so we have to be mindful. Now another really fun part to put a little bit of our highlights on is up here in these pieces right in here. So I'm going to go along the purple here and just add a little bit of a line, and then I'm going to add a couple of dots, and that gets really nice and juicy, gives it a little bit of a pop. Same thing over here and in here, up in here. Super fun. Now I'm going to come down into these areas in here and start to add a little bit of highlighting on the edge. So you can see that I'm just bringing a little bit of that white in there and adding a couple of dots. I think my pen is starting to lose its ink, friends. It is. I feel like we are coming to the end of this one. So I'm just going around the edge here. And then what I'll also do is I'll start to come in and add a little white dot into the purple just to give it a little pop. Really, really fun. I'll even come over here into this area and add a little bit of white right into the center just to give those guys a little bit of definition. And even if you wanted to go into her hair and add little highlights into her hair, you could do a couple of little white pieces here and there just to add some interest to Frieda's hair. Really, really fun. Such an enjoyable piece to work with, and I hope that you enjoyed it too. Well, okay, we have come to the end, and if you want to go ahead and put your chop on your piece, I'm going to grab my pen and just put my chop on here. I'm just going to do it right next to her pretty little face. And there you have it. We have completed Frieda, and you can see that I now have a triptych of beautiful Friedas, which I absolutely love, and I may even do more. These are great to make as cards or as a gift. If somebody's going through a hard time, Frieda's a great symbol for determination, and I just couldn't think of a better class to do during this time. So I hope you got in touch with your inner Friada fabulousness, and I can't wait to see your work. Please post it on the Tangled Yogi Art community page or anywhere where you feel like posting it. I am not one of those teachers that says you have to solely do it on my site. I want to see you spread the joy as much as you can. So please, if you liked the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is the Tangled Yogi 333 channel. And that is all for today, folks. This is me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi, signing off. I hope you had a great time. I had a great time spending this time creating a video for you. See you soon.